Hey guys, welcome back to the channel today. Today I'm going to do a video on ditches in Florida. It's actually going to be on the Harris chain, but it's just going to be ditches on Lake Harris that I experienced when I do a lot of ditch fishing here in the Midwest. And when we went down to Florida, that is what I focused on in the team championship that we got 28th place. So I'm going to do this on ditch fishing on the Harris chain of lakes in Central Florida. If you guys are not a subscriber yet, if you're new to this channel, there's probably going to be a lot of new guys watching this since it's down in Florida. It's on a different area of the country. There's probably going to be a lot of new guys watching. So if you guys are new to the channel, become a subscriber. I got some more videos coming from Harris and kind of what I learned when I was down there a week. I also lived in Florida for a year about 17 years ago, so I got quite a bit of experience in Florida and understanding Florida waters. Back then, we really didn't know a whole lot about the contours and how to read them and all that stuff. We didn't have navionics back 20 years ago that I remember anyway. Maybe there was, and I just wasn't old enough to know how to find it yet. So I'm going to break you down through on Lake Harris. It's just going to be 3 spots on Lake Harris, basically 3 ditches that we fished in the Bassmaster Team Championship. That is where we actually did catch our fish. We fished a lot of other ditches in practice as well and found good fish there, and probably could have done just as well on some of those other ones. But I'm going to do it one lake at a time because it's kind of lengthy to do these and explain to everybody what's going on and how to fish a ditch and exactly what it is and how to find it. I'm going to show you a Navionics map and also a Google Earth map, kind of what I'm looking at, so you guys can understand them a little better. There also wasn't no videos when we was going down there for the team championship really for December or winter bass fishing on the Harris chain. So I'm going to try to get that out there, help some of the people out down there or people that's going there to fish the Harris chain that's never been there in those months. Okay, so let's get started. The ditches, they work best in the winter, at least here in the Midwest. Like I said, down there in Florida, I don't live down there all the time. But they work best in the winter. They're good in pre-spawn as well. They're good in post-spawn, and summer they do produce as well. And they produce year-round because these fish, they can move up and down very easily. And they can follow fish. There's shallow water nearby. Depending on which ditches you find, the ditches we were focusing on were up near shallower water because the water was up in the 70s in practice and then dipped down below the 70s down to I think like 63 by the end of the last tournament day there. So this is when they produce the best, is when the water temps drop below the 70 degrees is what I have found. Even though they can be consistent all times, they are very consistent when the water drops under the 70 degree mark. That's when I find them the best. Now, these are so consistent because it gives these fish quick access to deeper water when the water drops. The water temperature drops quickly. So they can pull right back out into this ditch. So if you find a ditch closer to the spawning flats, up near the shallow areas where they feed, they can pull right back out. Now, these fish, they will stage here because they have everything they need here. If you find a ditch anyway that has all the right stuff on it. When I speak about the right stuff, I'm talking about in Florida on the Harris chain anyway was hydrilla. Hydrilla was the main thing to find. And if you found eelgrass with the hydrilla, that was even better. But it seems like if you found eelgrass by itself, it didn't seem to have the fish numbers on it that the eelgrass mixed with the hydrilla had. Now, the hydrilla had numbers even without the eelgrass, but the eelgrass helps if it's in there. Now, let me go reading through my notes here on what all to talk about, because I got to talk about, I'm going to get some videos up here shortly, some pictures for you. And like I said, the more grass in the deeper water is the better, and the more types of grass there's the better. Like we had lily pads in the areas we were fishing. There was Kissimmee grass in the areas we were fishing. Then there was the eelgrass and the hydrilla grass out off of the bank. Now, these areas are great because they're great areas also because the bass can reload on them. When I'm talking about reloading, I'm talking about every day more fish will pull in on them. Even though you're catching them off of there, new fish will pull in. You will find resident fish here. You will also find, most importantly, what I'm talking about for the reloading fish is you will find bass that stage here. They stage here all season long. They stage here in the winter, the pre-spawn, spawn, post-spawn, summer, and fall. But winter is when they're the most stacked up in here and schooled together, the winter and the pre-spawn. Now, the lures to use in these ditches, the lures that I like to use, that we was using down there on the Harris chain anyway, was a bladed jig, but these all worked good on them, depending on when you're at the time of year. Exactly, all these lures work great. Bladed jigs, when I talk about a bladed jig, I'm talking about a chatterbait. I like to throw a 2K jig sub blade. I like to throw a 3-inch or a 3.5-inch big hammer swim bait on that. And then you can also throw spinner baits. You can throw swim baits by themselves. Don't have to be as a trailer. Plastic worms in all styles. I've done good with ribbon tail worms. I've done good with speed worms. Done great down there in the Bassmaster Team Championship with a big hammer ringer worm, which is just a 4-inch ribbon tail worm. Don't be afraid to downsize. Always be sure to play around with pegging your sinker and unpegging your sinker. That makes a difference depending on how deep they are in that grass. Jerk baits also work well. Same way with lipless crankbaits during the winter months. The lipless crankbaits work a lot of the times out of the year down in Florida, and then the jerk bait didn't really get bit on it in the team championship down there in practice or in the tournament. Actually took the jerk bait rods out of my boat for the tournament because the water hadn't really got low enough to where I was wanting it. I just had a couple followers in practice on that jerk bait, so it wasn't real significant for me. Like I said, the swim bait trailers work best for the bladed jigs that I'd found out anyway. That's when they're feeding heavier. When they're not feeding as heavy, go away from the swim bait because it's got more action. Go with something that's more subtle. Just any of the, trying to think of the ones. I know Azeko, or however you pronounce it, from Gary Yamamoto, stuff like that. A fluke works good. It ain't got as much action on it. Half ounce is what we caught them on, was working great to get it down there in that grass. Half ounce to 3/8 ounce works good, even a 3/4 ounce. If you want to go bigger, if they're feeding heavier, the 3/4 ounce will work great as well. The bladed jigs and spinner baits, from what I found out, will get you the bigger bites. The worms will get you the smaller fish. Not all the time, though. I've heard of lots of big bags being won down there on the Harris chain with plastics and worms as well, so don't get caught up in all that. But for us, when we was down there, our bigger fish were coming on the bladed jig, the 2K jig sub blade with the 3.5-inch big hammer. That's what our bigger fish was coming on. Our biggest one of the tournament was 6 pounds 10 ounces, and that was caught off of the area at what's the name of it? I'll get to it here. Hickory Point, I believe it was, is the area. I'm going to show you 3 areas here. So now in the first picture here you're going to see Lake Harris, and there's going to be 3 red areas. These are the ditches I'm going to talk about on Lake Harris that we fished in the Bassmaster Team Championship. And this is the 2023 Bassmaster Team Championship. Now, the second picture here, this is the ditch I'm talking about by Hickory Point. Actually, there's 2 ditches here. The red lines you're going to see are 2 separate ditches here. The one to the left is less defined, and the one to the right is a little more defined. Now, pay attention closely so you guys can learn how to read these ditches on your Navionics and on your contour maps. So, and you see up here on the orange, you're going to see the orange. That's a lily pad field up there. That's a lily pad field up on a flat, up on that ditch, and I'm going to go through this as well with the Navionics, and I'm going to go through this as well on Google Earth. So you're going to see both pictures, kind of be able to relate them back and forth, kind of what you're looking at. The green, that is a small point that is coming out into that ditch. That's a big factor right there, because that ditch, they'll move up, or that point, they move up on that to feed. They move up on that to spawn. Same way with that lily pad field. They can move up there and feed, move up there to spawn. Great staging area right near the deep water. Now, the blue circled right there, that is Hickory Point Ramp. This is important because there's a lot of local tournaments that go out of here, guys, and they weigh their fish in here and they throw them back right there at Hickory Point. So this makes it a very high percentage area. And with everything here it offers everything. And the yellow, these are kind of the areas you want to focus on here for the winter time. Look for hydrilla and eelgrass out off the edge of that ditch and out in front of that Kissimmee grass and lily pads. This is a great area, not only in the winter either. I mean, they'll move up there and then lily pads up a little further, even when the water starts to warm up and they start pulling up. They'll pull up into this area and it'll be great outside of winter as well. But that was a great winter area for me. That is where I caught the 6-pound, 10-ouncer in the Bassmaster Team Championship. We caught, what was it, 5 keepers. 5 or 6 of them came from there. I forget how many. I think we actually caught 5 of them on day 2 out of that area. We only caught 1 on day 1 out of there. That was the big one, the 6-pound, 10-ouncer. And then day 2, we pulled the limit off of it. Now, the third picture here I'm going to show you, this ditch is east of the point to the south of Long Island, which is over kind of in the center of Lake Harris on the south side. Just look for Long Island, and it's east of that point. There's a point that comes up and almost kind of touches. There's a little canal in between them. Not really a canal. It's bigger than a canal. In between that bank and Long Island, that point comes out. Now, like I said, it's just to the east of that point, to the south of Long Island, and then it's going to be on your west bank going in south. That ditch runs right in there off of that, and that is perfect. It was a perfect staging area. I was surprised there wasn't as many guys that found that. And actually, back to the Hickory Point, there was only one other boat we seen out of the 248 boats at the team championship that even fished that bank in the tournament. So that was really neat to find that nobody else had found. Now, the red lines, again, you're going to see here where the ditch is much more defined coming around the point on the east side of that point. When you come around and then staying on that west bank going south from Long Island, that is a more defined. You can see that ditch kind of coming in there, or I guess it would be going out of there, but you can see where the red lines are. That would actually be going out from the bank into that ditch. But that's what you're looking for on the contour maps to read those ditches. Now, the further east you get from that point, you can see where it starts to flatten out. That's where it starts to get on. There's a giant hydrilla flat out there. Had it figured up on Google Earth, about 70 acres or so, I believe it was. Now, the orange, here you go again. We're going to see this again. There's a lily pad field up on that flat, and that is out in front of that ditch, and it drops off. That ditch drops, or that drops off into that ditch, those lily pads up there. So that was a pattern we found as well, as those lily pads up by that stuff. Now the green, this area again, you'll also see has a point that comes out there. This one is wider and it resembles more of a flat, but if you look at it, it comes out to a point dropping into that ditch off to the left side into that ditch right there. Now the yellow, focus on these areas in the winter. This isn't where all the bass are going to be exactly all the time in the winter. These are just the areas I would focus on in the winter. Fan cast around, fan cast up shallow, deeper water. Use your electronics to try to find everything. Now, when you're searching for these ditches for submerged grass, hydrilla, like I mentioned, is primarily what I'm looking for, and eelgrass is also very productive, but I found I got to have the hydrilla in it, at least in my experience when we was down there in December. So if you find the hydrilla and the eelgrass together, that is the perfect combination. Use your electronics, guys. If you got front-facing sonar, it is extremely effective during this process because you can see it under the water in front of you. You can see out there. You can see that grass out there. It's not so effective for me anyway, catching individual fish, because I couldn't see a lot of those fish with it unless I threw a jerkbait out there to pull them out of the grass because they were so thick in that grass. Now, if you don't have the front-facing sonar to find that grass, you can find it with a 360 works. If you don't have 360, you can find it with side imaging. If you don't have side imaging, you can actually find it with a 2D sonar. It's just going to look more kind of like a tree coming up or brush under the water when you get over the top of the hydrilla or eelgrass. Now, if you're not sure, or even don't have a sonar on what kind of grass it is fishing, throw a 3/4 ounce bladed jig in there, throw a 3/4 ounce slipless crankbait, even throw a 6 to 10 foot diving crankbait in that grass just to try to figure out what kind of grass it is. If it's eelgrass, hydrilla grass, exactly what you're coming through if you don't know what it is. So now the fourth picture I'm going to show you here. This here is actually 2 ditches, and this is on the south side of Long Island. It's on the south side, and it's going to be on the southwest side of it, as you can tell in the picture there, and from the very first picture, exactly where it was. So now the red you will see two ditches here. The one to the left on the southwest side of Long Island, which is a little more defined going into that small pocket. You can see it a little better. And then on the right, up towards the top, you can see the second ditch that is not quite as defined. First, we're going to talk about the left side ditch first, the one on your left, the one that is more defined. You will see it's 13 feet deep at its deepest point out there. Follow the red lines, and basically what you want to do here is you want to picture these lines as small highways. Just picture an interstate, okay, like an interstate highway. That's your main road. Your interstate's your main road. So all these red lines are coming off of your interstate. These are basically like your small highways that lead you into the towns, lead you off the interstate to where the places you want to go, the places that everybody uses daily, you know, to go back to work, back and forth, use the interstate to get there quicker. So basically picture it as that. Now, this is where the bank drops off into the ditch, okay? So the green up there, the green is flats. The green all the way to the left, back in that pocket, is just a small little flat, and then the green to the right in front of the bigger pocket is a much more defined flat. You can see the contour lines are more spread out. That makes it more defined there. And these flats are so important because there will be flats. And with these flats, these bass will spawn on, and where the shad and bait fish can move up to when they're feeding on plankton, they can move up and down as that water warms up. And as these bait fish pull up, the bass follow these bait fish up. Even if they're not going to be up there spawning, they're going to follow these bait fish up there, and they're going to be feeding on the bait fish because that's what a lot of these fish eat, is the bait fish. The great thing about the ditches in the winter and the colder water, the bass don't have to go far, guys, to reach these flats. So that makes these areas more high percentage areas to catch these bass, and they're going to be more schooled up in the wintertime. So you want to try to find these areas where they're going to be bunched up. So now the yellow, these are the areas to focus on to catch these bass moving back and forth with the water temps rising and falling here in the wintertime. I'm talking, late November through early January down in Florida when the water temps are under 70 degrees. So, and if you want to find the submerged grass and the eelgrass in these areas, guys, that's the key again. I want to emphasize that again, the hydrilla grass and the eelgrass. Now, why is that so significant? The key is because it gives the bass cover not only to ambush the bait fish, to hide behind and ambush the bait fish to eat, but it also, that grass holds warmth in the wintertime. So when that water drops, that grass still is holding warmth inside of that water. So the bass will pull up into that grass when it gets a little colder and they start feeling colder to kind of keep that warmth because it holds that warmth in there. And then the bass can be out on the edges of these ditches or they can move up shallower on the flat. It just all depends on the weather that week or whenever you're there fishing on what's going on. It depends on your water temperatures, rain runoff, wind, clouds, is it sunny? And all of those determine what mood the fish will be in and where the bait fish will be. Now, let's move on to the ditch that was to the right side of the picture and up towards the top. The red, you will see the ditch looks like a deeper hole off the point, okay? Out in the middle of Long Island right there. After looking closer, you can see the ditch leads right up to that point, but it also runs out to the right or the east side and then also runs off to the left or the west side right along that flat, guys. Back towards that previous ditch I was speaking about. And that ditch runs right off the edge of that flat and the edge of that lily pad field, guys. The oiled lily pad field, which is in the orange right there. The orange circled is another lily pad field. Like I said, these lily pads, they make it great for spawning bass, and they like to stage up in these areas just outside of that during pre-spawn before they get ready to spawn, and they like to sit out there and feed up. We was actually catching some bucks up there in December before the tournament got started, but when the tournament, the water tip dropped, the bucks kind of moved out of there, but some of the bucks were up there squirting at this point, so they were getting close, but they were still a ways out. Now, the yellow, like before, these are the areas to focus on, and remember, look for the submerged grass to help you find these fish. Now, lastly, guys, I want to talk about this, and I've seen about this in a couple of videos, and only a couple guys talked about it, but I want to talk about it because I heard some guys get burned in the tournament at the team championship because of this, was because of the wind. So that's why I want to mention this and walk you through this real fast. Now, so let's talk about wind direction and how this affects the fishing and current. Okay, the first picture here shows these areas, and then which way is north, east, south, and west. Okay, in the red writing, you'll see N for north, east for east, south, or E for east, S for south, and W for west. Okay, and then the three areas are circled again in green. Okay, so the wind is very important when fishing the grass and ditches. It's especially important this time of year. Sorry, my notes went away from me here. Go back up here. There we go. With the winter fronts pushing in, you can see strong winds from any direction, guys. It's very important to find areas on different sides of the lake, or look for areas that are going to be protected from the wind, but not too far out of the wind, because the wind does help you catch more fish and gets more bait fish up there because it pushes the plankton up there. So be sure to find stuff on different areas of the lake and stuff that's protected, or find a whole bunch of areas depending on which way the wind's going to blow, just in case it blows. So now I'm talking about it being protected. Now, what am I talking about when I'm talking about being protected? Well, when you're fishing these grass, the hydrilla and grass down there in Florida, if the wind gets to blowing real hard, it causes something called the bank gets blown out. Basically, what happens there is your grass gets blown out, it churns up the grass, it gets real muddy, it gets real nasty, and it just gets blown out, and then the fish disappear on you. So try to find areas that are not going to have that happen, or protected, or find more than one area. So in case the wind blows out of a different direction, you'll have a backup to run to. And then next is current. Current is very important because it helps you pattern the bass easier. It helps them move into an area and stay there more with that current. The current helps push them in there. Now, you're thinking current. Okay, current, right? Yeah, I know. Lake Harris, no. The Harris chain, it doesn't really have a current running through it. But when that wind gets to blowing, especially about over 5 miles an hour down there on the Harris chain, it's so flat that really gets that water flowing, and it can cause currents. If you find just down the bank, it'll cause a current. Anything that has an island through it, or a little like a canal coming through the islands, like the 2 islands there. You'll see this here in the pictures coming up. That'll create a current. So let's look at this picture here. This is going to be a north wind. This picture here shows all 3 areas and how the wind can benefit or hurt you. Okay, the yellow is the wind pushing the water. Okay, yellow is the wind pushing the water south there. Now the red is the current, and there'll be a stronger current in between both islands. That's because it pinches together there, and it's going to create more current. As all them waves come together, it's going to push a current trying to push through those islands there. And the great news for the ditches on the south side of Long Island, the only area there that might get blown out just to the south of Long, that would be the one just to the south of Long Island there. And that could only happen if there's a strong northeast wind there that would blow that one out there. So with Long Island being north of these 2 areas, that creates not a wind block from the north winds, but also a good flow of current, because it creates that funnel like I was talking about coming through there. Now the area by Hickory Point, it's protected well and gets a good current too, because of where it pinches down between Big Harris and Little Harris right there. Now let's talk about a south wind. So this picture here shows a south wind. The only area that could be blown out really here is that area in Hickory Point if you get a south wind blowing on it. The other 2 areas up there by Long Island are very protected and have a good current coming through them from that south wind pushing through the island there up towards the north. And then if you look and you see the west wind here, that picture shows a west wind, one right here in front of you. The only area that it would hurt that could get blown out is that Hickory Point area again there. Thankfully, though, there is a point to the west of that area that is a wind block. If you can see that there, kind of create a wind block depending on how which way it was blowing out of the west there. If it's blowing out of the southwest, it might not as much. Blowing out of the northwest, it would create that wind block there. If it's not wind blown out, that sets up perfect with the current coming from that point and the funnel around that point between Big Harris and Little Harris. Those 2 spots at Long Island set up perfectly as well with that current and Long Island as the wind block. And lastly, let's talk about the east wind. The picture shows an east wind right here. And an east wind would actually create less current on these areas, but would pose little risk to any of these areas being blown out. The area that might get blown out in this area on the south side of Long Island, the one that is the south of Long Island on that south bank, that one could get blown out depending on how hard it is blowing. But the good news is you have a good wind block with that east bank blocking the wind and the south bank kind of blocking it there. So that's the good news there. Not sure how hard that would blow in there. There was a little bit of a northeast wind. It didn't affect us at all in that area for that tournament. The tournament was blowing pretty good one day, about 15 mile an hour, if I remember right. And you would have little current in that Long Island area, but you would have a good current in the Hickory Point area. So those are some good areas in Harris. And hopefully this helps you guys understand ditches on Lake Harris here. And I'll do some more over all the other lakes here once I get them broke down. I just want to do it one lake at a time because it takes so long to do it. I'll do a couple areas on each lake. So hopefully this helps you guys out. If you guys are still out there watching, if this video helps you out, if you have any comments on any questions on how to catch them down there, just comment at me, holler at me through the comments. I'll get back with you guys. You can also hit me up on Facebook, Levi Snow. If you got any questions down there on the Harris chain, I'll try to help you guys out. All right, thanks guys.